Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carolyn Boyer, the Vice President of NAPS, and I want to welcome you to this week's Lunch and Learn webinar. Before handing it over to our presenter, Mark Hummel, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's recording will be available on the NAPS website, and as a reminder, you need to log in as a NAPS member in order to download the webinar. After his presentation, we'll have a brief Q&A where you can ask your questions two ways. You can type it in the chat portion of the toolbox, or if you'd rather ask him yourself, raise your hand and I'll turn your microphone on for you. With that, it gives me great privilege to tell you a little bit about today's presenter. As Director of Sales and Strategy for Bullhorn's Automation Products, Mark has had the opportunity to discuss automation strategy with staffing firms of all sizes. Mark began accumulating his understanding of the recruiting process as an account director at a top 20 technical staffing company. After witnessing the pains of overly manual processes leading to a loss of efficiency and unnecessary bottlenecks, Mark set out to join the automation startup Fry, which focused on removing non-value add manual steps for staffing firms who are working jobs in vendor management system. This team joined the Bullhorn family in 2018, followed by the acquisition of Herefish in 2019, displaying Bullhorn's vision for a staffing process that removes unnecessary busy work and allows staffing firms to focus on building valuable relationships with their candidates and clients. Now Mark is responsible for aligning internal and external stakeholders to enable the staffing industry to move with digitalization to automation to AI in pursuit of a more humanized recruiting process. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great privilege to welcome you to our presenter, Mark Hummel. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. I appreciate the introduction. And yes, much as she was saying, I'm excited to be here because my duties and pleasure day in and day out is to get to speak with staffing firms of all sizes at all different points of the automation journey and learn more about not only their current processes and current pain points, but also what their future plans for both revenue retention, revenue growth, and how automation plays a part in that. But today, what we're going to talk about, though automation is going to be a key theme, is really around the overall shift in the market that we've seen. I know people are probably tired of hearing about the giant catalyst of COVID and what the results of that have been for our industry, but we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about how that's accelerated our overall path towards seeing companies embrace automation and deploy automation successfully, and how it's now really become somewhat of a given that automation is necessary in parts of your process to really compete in this industry. So with that, what we're going to start by talking about is just giving some landscape of the overall industry as a whole. Today, automation represents a $12 billion industry, but if we look at what this is projected to be in the very near future, by 2025, KPMG thinks that this will be a $232 billion industry. So that's a huge explosion of what we expect the revenues to be within this industry. And if we look at staffing specifically, we see that we are much earlier on the curve, the adoption curve, than other industries. So while other industries, are probably closer to that apex, later in the early majority stage, we certainly see that staffing firms and staffing industry has a great opportunity because we're still sitting at that early majority stage, just past the early adopter stage. And so what this means for people who are looking into automating workflows is that we've got now technology that's out there that's been around for long enough and learned from enough processes to be super useful and super tested, so that we know that this is reliable technology. But at the same time, we're not so late in the adoption that you have lost any attempts at a competitive advantage to leverage automation. So still very much something that if you as a firm have not gotten into and developed a strategy around, you still have an opportunity to be in the early majority to do that with a lot of great technologies out there. And so the question becomes, why has this quick upward expansion come? Why do we project that by 2025 that it's going to be as huge of an industry as it is? And I think when we look at, the obvious pillars for why you put in automation in general, it's so that you can, do more with less. So your team is not looking at, the busy work throughout the process and getting bogged down and copying and pasting things from certain fields, or working within the ATS to too heavy of an extent. Now we can use automation to be able to make sure that your recruiters are being able to focus on just developing that relationship, and that leads to consistent experiences. So again, we see companies of all sizes, but certainly companies of larger multi-branch, multi-office companies are seeking to have your experience with their St. Louis office be very similar and up to the same standards as your experience with the Washington, D.C. office, especially as we look at how COVID has pushed to a more remote workforce. In certain industries, your candidates have gone from needing to search within a certain proximity to, especially your technology candidates are often able to be fully remote. So you're going to have candidates that are somewhere in the journey across different people at different branches, and we want to keep a consistent experience, and automation certainly helps with that. And the other piece is flexibility. So again, giving your team the opportunity to put a human touch on their interactions with their clients and with their candidates, because all of this stuff is happening in the background. So it gives you that flexibility to add that personal touch. And so if we look at our grid survey, this Bullhorn puts out a survey every year to talk about or to ask questions around company strategies within the staffing and recruiting industry. One of our favorite questions is always about the priorities for 2021. And if we look at some of these priorities, most of them seem very obvious to us, right? Candidate acquisition and sourcing, winning new clients, those are always high on the list. But what we saw a real jump in, or really even just a getting added to the priority list this year, is that optimizing remote work. So we're seeing strategies need to come into place for us to keep all of our teams across our organization aligned on process, aligned on giving a consistent experience. And of all of these priorities that customers have talked to us about, a big portion of these can be handled through automation, or automation plays a key role in being able to deploy them. So we're going to talk through some examples today, because I don't want to just give you guys a super broad conversation around automation helps with everything and not give some examples. So we'll talk about some examples around candidate acquisition and engaging candidates and keeping them nurtured. But all of these pieces, while a human element is certainly necessary, the upfront work can be done via automation. And so when we look at how this benefits us as really an industry, we look at staffing firms, it benefits the recruiters because you're not doing as much repetitive work. Certainly the work can have some errors in it, but really the biggest thing is you didn't hire your recruiters saying, hey, you guys need to be really good at copying a field from this area in the applicant tracking system and putting it in this one, or taking the same email template and copying and pasting it to a bunch of different candidates. You hire them because they're great at building relationships. So it helps recruiters in that way of freeing up their time for those relationships. And same with salespeople. Salespeople, want to be in front of clients, especially knock on wood when we get to all be back in person with clients. Want to be doing the donut drops, shaking hands, getting to meet with everybody. And so they have a lot of administrative work today that has to be done to keep the system up to date. That really automation can help take off their plate so they can focus on building those relationships. Operations is always happy with this, with automations, because it puts a more defined process for the recruiters and salespeople in place, so they know kind of where recruiters, salespeople, clients, and candidates are within the journey. But it also keeps the ATS up to date, which operations loves, because it shows the investment in the ATS was well worth it, because now we have that as the single source of truth. And then from a marketing perspective, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that too, but marketing teams and content creation, all of that is super important to being able to get your brand name out there and recognized, so that you're not having cold calls with clients and candidates, rather that they've at least been semi-warmed because they've heard about your brand. They've maybe received some content from your brand. So marketing loves this because it facilitates that arm and that outreach that they're looking to achieve. But most importantly, obviously, we all know from being in this industry, the most important two people in this equation are candidates and clients. So keeping your candidates happy is certainly important. Keeping them engaged. We're going to go through some stats of what happiness looks like for a candidate, but also keeping your clients engaged. As they have either bombarded consistently with a lot of different staffing firms who are offering them their services, who are offering them a pitch that gives a unique advantage to working with them. It's important to be constantly in front of your clients, and a high touch relationship is great from a personal perspective, but also helping aid that experience through automation is crucial. So you can do that with more clients. And so if we look at why it's important for both of those two groups, some stats that you guys may have seen before, but our partners over at Barclay Jones have gathered these as well. The best candidates are only on the market for on average 10 days. So having a relationship with those candidates, presenting them for a job, those pieces are the day in and day out what we're doing in staffing. But what we need to add to that is to make sure that we're attempting to get those silver medal candidates out to other jobs. So how do we utilize the fact that we have a 10-day window with this candidate before they go somewhere else to make sure that even if it's not for the job that we are thinking of them for, we keep putting them out to other additional jobs. The other piece here, 81% of candidates are saying that if they had continuous updates, they would feel it's a better overall experience. And it's certainly for some industries rather than others, or for some types of recruiting, like recruiting that goes through a vendor management system. We hear that you have less control of the process with the hiring managers, and so updates to the candidates maybe feel more few and far between. But utilizing automation, kind of having this consistent communication through automation on top of the recruiter, the recruiter's actions with that relationship is going to help the candidate feel like they're being better engaged with, which then obviously keeps them more likely to be retained. And I think the one that's the dagger in the hearts for any operational based person certainly is that 72% of the candidates that you place are already in your system before you go out and source for them again. So this big thing of as soon as we get a job, recruiters go straight to the job boards, start using views to look for candidates, straight to the job boards to post the job. Those are great tools, but we want to also supplement that with your existing database being not only filled with candidates, but filled with candidates where we know that they've been engaged with, so they're more likely to pick up the phone when we call them. We're going to talk about some of that process and what that looks like as well. And then on the client side, what you see is the ability to take an existing customer, all kinds of stats for why that is much more useful than trying to go out and get a net new one. So obviously, retaining a current customer is 6 to 7 times less costly than going out and finding a new one. So making sure that we are in consistent communication with clients, setting those relationship touch points is huge, because we don't want to ever have to backfill a client. And again, the probability of repeat business is much higher. So 60 to 70% is the probability of you being able to sell to an existing client versus net new in that 5 to 20% range. And then this last one too, 68% of clients will leave for poor customer service. It kind of goes back to the stat we're looking at from a candidate's perspective, that really the consistent communication, consistently setting expectations with your clients, those touch points are huge, because they're having people all the time who are knocking on their door and claiming that they can do a better job recruiting for them. So the big thing is just being that constant partner who's there when needed for your clients, and automation can play a huge role in freeing up your time to make that happen. Okay, so all those pieces to say, where do we focus? So when we talk to customers today, and when Bullhorn is developing our strategy for where we think we can help the industry and help our partners in automation, and how do we look at this? And so for us, it starts with this journey, which is our guiding light for the process that we hope to see the staffing industry kind of follow, and we are seeing many clients follow today. It starts with this digitization. So before we get into any of the cool stuff that we can do, the cool stuff that you guys can automate with our technology, other technologies out there, your applicant tracking system, your single source of truth, has to not only have a lot of data in it, but it has to have really good data in it, and data that we can trust and data that's actionable. So the digitization is, the way I always put it for clients is, how many processes do we have that live outside of your applicant tracking system today? How many spreadsheets do recruiters work in? How many other systems do account managers track leads or opportunities, or heads up on a job that's coming down the pipeline? Can we bring all of that into one single system and make that data really useful, really accurate? And then as we look into the next stage of automation, can we start automating that data to be rich and useful as well? And so from digitization to automation, now we've got all this data in the system. We know that it's accurate, or we know that a section of that data is super accurate. So we want to run automations off of that to take away some of the busy work that our account managers and that our recruiters are having to deal with. So automation then leads itself to the buzzword that I know the industry has maybe some ill will towards, because so many people use this this AI topic in their discussions. But really, AI is where we're all looking to get, as we look to augment or help the human experience. So again, not AI as let's replace the recruiter or let's replace the account manager, but AI as, can we have the tool make some intelligent decisions for us on where to best spend our time, on which candidates are the best candidates to reach out to for which roles. And then we leave the personalization and the human element to the actual conversations at that point. And so within that journey, we look specifically at this automation layer and kind of the three pillars that we consider when we talk about automation. And those are productivity, data health, and experience. And the linchpin for this, kind of like we were talking about a second ago, is the data health. So if we can have accurate data, have data that we feel is reliable in the system, then we can start to run some automations from the productivity side for sales and recruiting. But we can also run automations that are direct to candidates for both candidates and clients. And I would say that that one on the right is the most crucial for you to have good data health, because the stories that we hear, or the chair sides that we've done where automations have gone awry, is you didn't have the data as healthy as you expected in your system. You went to do a mass email campaign to only your non-placed candidates, and you got a handful of candidates coming back saying, I'm on assignment right now on one of your assignments at this customer. Why are you emailing me asking, saying that we haven't heard from you in a while? So that data health is vital, because yes, your internal sales and recruiting team will be somewhat upset if they are getting automation sent to them with bad data. But your external, your brand, is crucial that you have good data health before you start automating any outbound to those guys. And so I think the other big thing when we talk about these pillars and we talk about where automation lives, I think maybe the scary piece of this for some customers who haven't maybe yet developed an automation strategy is that really automation can be used in so many different places within the staffing and recruiting industry, within the overall cycle recruiting. So this kind of gives a general overview of a bunch of the different buckets that you could do automations within. But the big piece of this, and where we see the success for clients that are rolling out automation, is to kind of work with your automation vendor, with your automation partner, to discuss your overall goals as an organization. It's not coming into this with your goals of, this is what I want to automate. Maybe you have those, which is great, but also kind of peeling back the onion a little bit more and saying, these are my overall goals as an organization. This is where I have pains today, is my ability to convert leads to candidates, or my ability to convert a placed candidate and redeploy them. So that's really the conversation that you want to have, is starting this off much more high level on what the overall problem is, and then work with your partner to be able to diagnose where there's opportunities for automating, because we see new stuff every day for different ways that people have leveraged automation. I'm sure other automation suppliers would say much the same. So we're going to hit on just a few examples. This is the fun part, because I know, and we've had these conversations before, Mark, it's great that you've set the stage and that we know that automation is important, but how are people using this? How would you suggest that people use this? What are some actual tangible examples? So we're going to hit some tangible examples for you guys as we go through this here. So we start by talking about the productivity pillar. So again, remember that productivity pillar is on the left side, talking about your recruiting and sales, and how do we have processes put in place and give consistent experiences internally. And so some of the things that we've seen, some of the more straightforward ones, proactively notify your internal recruiters when a candidate's coming up to end their role. So a lot of people, especially in Bullhorn, will pull that report to say, hey, these are my ends, or my upcoming ends. You also have the opportunity to have this kind of go out as a proactive email to the recruiters to say, these are candidates that you have that are ending within 30 days. What's your strategy for those? Within there too, the same type of thing. Off the back of that, you can have Bullhorn tasks that get automated. So it could be that type of example where you have these candidates rolling off assignment within 30 days. You can not only receive an email as a recruiter, but you could also automatically have a Bullhorn task created to be able to remind yourself to take an action on those candidates. And then certainly alerting your recruiters when a client or a candidate has dropped off the radar. So, simple automations like this is an active candidate that has not been communicated with in 30 days, or this is an active client who has had no actions on their profile within 30 days. So that begs the question, are they actually active? Are they dormant? Or should we be taking some additional activity or action with them? And then going into the experience side, so remember this is the right side with our candidates and clients, having these automatic outreaches are huge, because the big thing when we look at having a cold initial interaction with a client or a candidate is, do they have any recognition of who you are as a person or who your brand is? And so you see much better conversion rates on picking up the phone, much better conversion rates on replying to a text message or replying to an email if they've already had some communication with you. And so the train of thought today is, let's pound the phones until they've had enough voicemails in their inbox to where they have to know who we are. But there is this automated route of what we call the give, ask. So 3 gives and an ask is a pretty common refrain that we talk about with our customers, which is give them useful content, give them useful information about the industry and the jobs that you think they might be looking for, and give them some understanding of you as a brand and how you might be able to help them in the future. And then the ask can be something that starts off maybe more trivial, like an ask for them to update their resume, an ask for them to give you some additional information to update their profile. All of those emails, that entire campaign of those 3 gives and an ask, can be automated. So we think about how our interaction is and how we work on breaking down the barriers between us and a net new client or us and a net new candidate. A lot of that, if you have good data in the system, those outreaches can be manufactured. And that doesn't, that's not just for net new acquisition. As you can see, we can do stuff like, we see plenty of customers reaching out to contractors who are on assignment for, you've been on assignment for this number of days. Give us, an NPS score on us as a brand at this point, or give us an NPS score on this client that you're working for, because that's always really useful data as well. Is what if we can start automatically collecting how has it been working for this client, and we have a score that we can represent the next time we go to recruit another candidate for this role. It's a lot better conversation to say we have a job at a client in this industry who does X, Y, and Z, who also scores, really well on our Net Promoter Scores. Those conversations and being able to enrich that data, again, all through an automated experience. And so if we look at what we were talking about earlier, you wouldn't want to set up one of these campaigns without having some really good data health. And believe it or not, data health is something that can also be automated. You think that, hey, whether or not a candidate's profile is up to date, that has to have some human eyes on it to know that. But some straightforward things that we've seen our clients automating, stuff around what is their job title. So maybe they've put in an application to a job, but they don't have a job title in their profile that we have within Bullhorn. An automation can automatically take that job title from the job that they're applying for and put it in as their job title kind of placeholder. The other piece too, certainly, as we're calling out here, is taking the end date of certain placements that they're on. So candidates coming to an end, and you now are not able to maybe extend that contract, so they need to be redeployed. So we should automatically update them within your applicant tracking system to say that this is no longer a placed candidate, but it is a available candidate, and this candidate's end date was X. So that we look at clients' databases and where data health can be a challenge is, like we talked about earlier, you make the placement, we should automatically change their record to placed so that they're not getting communication for open jobs. But on the same token, they end an assignment, we should automatically move them back to active so that they are getting all of the notifications for anything that falls in that workflow. And so the way to think about automation, at least certainly the Bullhorn automation platform, is it's basically an if this, then that scenario. So if this happens, then automate that action. So if we look at an example that kind of encapsulates all three of these areas, which reminds you that this that happens doesn't have to be a one-to-one to a that. So it doesn't just have to be when a placement finishes, update the candidate's placement record to reflect new dates. It can be all of these additional things all in one automation. When a placement finishes, update their placement status to completed, but also set the candidate status to available, and update the candidate's availability date, and update the candidate's job title to whatever the latest placement job title was. So all of that goes into your data health. Now your experience piece is, send the client an NPS survey for feedback on that candidate. Find out what the client says their experience was with that candidate, so you can decide how marketable and how redeployable they are. Send the candidate the NPS survey for feedback on the clients. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but getting that understanding of how do your candidates feel about the clients that they're working for, being able to use that as a marketable benchmark is huge. Re-engaging the candidate for nurturing. So if you don't have them coming off an assignment and directly getting redeployed, that would be an ideal world, but we know the redeployment scores, depending on industry, are in the low teens if we are being generous, and we're averaging in all industries considering also healthcare. So the big piece is, if we're not redeploying them, putting them immediately into a nurturing campaign, so that even though the recruiter might not have a job for them right now, how do we continue to have them getting jobs and seeing active opportunities for working with us in the future? And the productivity side, notifying all of your owners of everything above. So all these activities that happen, that's great, but also tell the recruiter that, by the way, we just automated all these activities. So now this candidate's up to date and they are looking for redeployment of some sort. And then set a task for both the client and the candidate to have check-ins with their respective recruiters and account managers, which again is just a reminder to have a human touch to this. Okay, so we talked about a lot of that, overarching and in theory. So if we look at kind of how this can come together in a new process for you, this automation and action section, we'll walk through a little bit of a more in-depth example for you. So first, earlier in this piece, I don't know if everybody caught, but we talked about how we make the candidate's data more actionable. So certainly, can we have all of the data from the candidate be accurate and up to date? Do we have their latest resume? All that good stuff. But what about, as we're looking to actually talent pool these candidates, we're asking these candidates, hey, let's get a recent copy of your resume. Let's have you update your profile. So, giving them a link to be able to basically say, here's what is in your profile today, and what pieces of this do you want to change, and having a survey response for that. But also being able to, give them some guidance or get some guidance from them on what types of roles they're looking for. So we can pre-seed some of these roles that we have open and available to them. They can tell us which roles of these that they are interested in, or just click into them and interact with them. But the cool thing is how do we take all of that data and make that data actionable? So we've asked the candidate to do all these pieces, and yes, we've updated their profile to suggest all these additional pieces of information, but why not also tell you, your team, your recruiters, your account managers, how engaged this candidate is? So we've put, 300 candidates, let's say, of, a very distinct skill set or a very distinct, slicing of your database through this automated process. And who has been the most engaged back with us? Why don't we put a score on how much they've engaged with us, so that we can make that an element that tells us how likely it is for them to pick up the phone when we call them, or how likely it is for them to be interested in responding to positions as we send them over. So things like what we call this HereFish engagement score, and that calculates how many times have they viewed our web page, how many times have they viewed the links that you've sent them, the emails they've sent them, all of this stuff within the last 30 days. And then it gives you the ability to rank those candidates. So if you guys are familiar with the Bullhorn interface, you're searching, obviously, when you're looking within your system. Maybe you do the find matching candidates option that automatically brings back candidates. Maybe you sort by category, skill, that type of stuff. But what if on that list view, you also had the ability to see how engaged all of these candidates were? And so that's what the HereFish score does for you, is you now nail down your list. These are the hot candidates that I want to call because they fit the mold for what I'm trying to recruit for. And out of those hot candidates, because we've had engagements going on in the background, I can see the ones that have the highest score, which then correlates to the ones that are most likely to pick up the phone, answer a text, answer an email. And so those pieces there go back to, we're not saying that the next step of this is automatically interview them, automatically submit them to a job, and automatically follow them through the placement process. The human element comes in play here because we've given your recruiters actionable intelligence of not only are these good candidates, but we also see how engaged they are. So your recruiters can focus on which candidates give the most likely return on their efforts. And so from there, when a new job comes out, you now have this really qualified pipe. And this is something that, we've been excited to announce that, we're bringing to market. It's in beta for us today, is the match and message feature. But we also have some great partners who do this matching process as well. So, Daxtra's, Monster, TextKernel, all those guys, if you've evaluated their software before, have the ability to do match on much more than just semantics, going into the AI field. So if we interjected one of those technologies, or future state, if we use our technology that's in beta today, what if a new job comes out and your recruiter gets an immediate email notification saying, hey, this job is now assigned to you? So an account manager just put this in the system, it just came in from a VMS automatically, and now the next step is recruiter, this is a role that you've been assigned to, or that fits the skills that you are responsible for recruiting. Not only do we want to inform you that the role exists, but we also want to inform you that you have these candidates in the database that seem like a good fit. And what if we take that a little bit further? And this is all really more around your comfort as a firm and your comfort with automation. But what if we automatically reach out to those candidates when a new job becomes available? So in this example, we're talking about Rebecca, who's the recruiter, getting this job and not only seeing the matches that have a link back to Bullhorn to tell her that these are prospective good people to reach out to, but we're telling her we've actually already reached out to them. And if we look at any of their profiles, we can now see how they've interacted with that outreach as well. So now again, we're taking what's a manual process of searching for the candidates within Bullhorn, of searching for the candidates on the job boards, and at least the first pass of this, we're giving actionable data back to the recruiter, where hopefully the first time they get involved with a couple of these candidates is because the candidate has responded to the outreach, and that outreach has gone straight back to Rebecca, the recruiter. So again, just putting the onus to build the relationship on our recruiter's plate. And so, how this outreach can look is a text message, an email, automatically going out to the candidate saying, we have this new role, would you be interested in chatting? Candidate coming back to us and saying, that's great, they're open for conversations about this new role. And then again, let's connect in X minutes, X days, which then can automatically kick back to the recruiter who can schedule this appointment. Or we've even seen some clients do some cool stuff with integrating like a calendar link into their automation to automatically schedule this for them as well. And so as we go further down the process, let's say we've got a candidate or client, who's now shortlisted a group of candidates, and they say that these two candidates would be great to interview. What if, as the account manager changes that status in Bullhorn in the applicant tracking system, it enforces that behavior to get the account manager doing those actions in the system, because it then kicks off an automated outreach to the candidate. The candidate hears, hey, we have a client who's excited to set up this interview with you. Maybe we set up the interview again via a calendar link, but maybe this is an opportunity for us to leverage a human interaction and just to give them the opportunity to know a phone call is coming. And so you have, again, that option to do this automated, to do this as an automated task as well, like we're seeing here, to let the recruiter know to reach out to them. But either way, it's a warm reach out. And then from here, the consultant care piece of this. So we talked about before, keeping their data up to date, automatically putting them into a placed status, automatically putting the new end date that comes from the placement onto their profile, so that we can see when they're going to become available again, and then updating the title accordingly. So where that fits into this process is, we want them to come out of the automations that are specifically geared towards outreach of active candidates that aren't placed, and we want them to now be a placed candidate and fall into any automations that would fall in that flow. So as you look at having them start their first day, you look at having them go through the onboarding process, all these pieces can be automatic communications out to them to say, here's where here's your help area, here's your documents that we need you to fill out, be on the lookout for a packet from our onboarding team, all that good stuff. So keeping the communication up to date. And then we always say, looping in the feedback scores are huge. So how was your assignment? How was working with this recruiter? How was working with us as a company? All of those pieces are crucial. And we have some great partners in stuff like Great Recruiters that can even take that outreach and that survey piece to another level for you too. And then the redeployment one. So going back to, it's expensive to find new clients, certainly. It's also expensive net new to find new talent, new candidates. So when you've already got a candidate who hopefully has given you a really good score on your net promoter score for this assignment that they just came off of, they've given you a good score for working with you as a company, and the client's given them a good score for having them be a consultant on site with them, you really want to get those candidates redeployed. So you could set up a process that after all of those things happen, they go into a redeployment funnel that now is spitting them out jobs, let's say every 60 days before the end of their contract, 30 days before the end of their contract, doing everything we can to make sure they know that more roles exist and they should come back to us as a firm versus going out to market and finding another firm to redeploy them. And I think that's the biggest pain point of redeployment is though the industry has low redeployment rates, typically the candidate, because they're a good candidate, is finding work elsewhere just with another firm. So can we as a firm automate the process to keep them redeploying with us versus redeploying with our competition. And so again, just making sure the data health is good as well, updating them to previously placed or active status so that you have them in the automations for the future active ones as well. And then rating the role. And so the big thing as we looked at that entire process is there was about 43 different actions that happened that today your recruiters are doing, right? So your recruiters are doing all those things that we just talked about via calls, emails, texts. And so while those are all valuable and lead to valuable touch points with a candidate, valuable touch points with the client, what we want to see happen is actually having 3 of those interactions be from the actual recruiter. If we can have 40 of those interactions, 40 of those 43 interactions, looking like they're coming from the recruiter, emails that look like they're coming from the recruiter, texts that look like they're coming from the recruiter, but really the 3 actions are the candidate responds to us and we need to hop on a call. Those become much more valuable uses of our recruiter's time. And so if we look at what this kind of all wraps up in, and again, why these conversations with our partners have become so increased over the last year and a half, is because automation is really around making your team be able to be more human, be more productive. So, on average, 3.2 hours saved per day per employee for some of our clients that are using Bullhorn automation today. But I think these pieces are huge. So 76% increased placement from existing ATS, existing candidates within our ATS, 27% increase in redeployment rate. So making that redeployment rate, again, something to be super proud of. And the increase in the Net Promoter Score over 4 months. So being able to market yourself as a company that has a great Net Promoter Score with your candidates makes it much more, I'd say, a much better selling point when you're going out and trying to get net new clients as well. And so we see that 2020 again has been the year that really has driven a need for people to seriously look into and seriously start creating automation strategies. So if you look at this chart, right around the time that the bottom fell out of this, late Q1 into Q2, we saw a huge uptick in people looking to do more with less. Unfortunately, people had to let go of staff, of recruiters, of account managers, and so the scramble was, how do we make sure that activities that had been getting done manually by this much larger workforce can be done in an automated fashion. And so this has steadily increased throughout 2020, and we see the trend continuing. Ending last year up 152%, but that trend continues coming into 2021 as well. And I think the payoff for customers that are leveraging automation of some sort within Bullhorn is pretty obvious for us when we look at the statistics. So we're seeing more jobs added by candidates or by clients who are automating part of the process. We're seeing more submissions and more placements. And I think the interesting thing is, if you look at the charts to the right, you see we all went through the dip together, but those clients, those staffing firms that were automating portions of the process, rebounded at about the same time as those not using automation, but rebounded much higher. So that's where you see the spike of coming out of the dip that we had in 2020. People are keeping their team somewhat lean and being able to do more with less. All right, so that was me talking to you guys for 45 minutes straight. Hopefully you guys saw some stats that interest you in there, and love to open it up to questions from the group.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was very informative. Yes, so if you have a question, go ahead and type it, or you can raise your hand and I'll turn on your microphone. And okay, I've got one question. Is this a strategy that only works for larger firms?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that certainly at a lot of these conferences, that's a common question. Is this something that only the largest firms can invest in this and really leverage. But I would say, arguably, certainly firms of all sizes, but firms on the lower end of headcount probably leverage this in a more agile fashion, and in a fashion that gives you an even greater return on your investment in some cases, because it's how do we make a team of 10 people, a team of 30 people feel like to our clients and feel like to our recruiters that they're a team of 100 or 200 people. And so these automation strategies, if done well, can really propel your brand to making it feel like you're giving very white glove service as a very big organization, when in fact behind the curtain there's maybe 10 recruiters that are in that office.
Great, that's a great answer. Let me see. Oh, another question is, are there certain agencies that automation is better used in?
Yeah, I mean, I think if by agencies you mean like from like an industry perspective, definitely. I'd say each staffing industry gives its own unique benefits for where automation can come into play. So from healthcare perspective, I always say that healthcare has been putting the candidate first and candidate redeployment, first before it was even fashionable to do so. So they're really big on how do we create nurture campaigns to make them feel like they're part of a community with us as a healthcare organization, as a healthcare staffing organization. Light industrial really is around, we've seen a lot of stuff around keeping the database fresh, because when you get, a position, it's, oftentimes 10 warehouse people, 20 people of a certain skill set. So knowing who's active and engaged in your database is huge to be able to turn around in light industrial. And then in technology, I think the benefits there is again playing the long tail. So technology, people are so heavily recruited, oftentimes for similar roles at similar companies. So how do you, elevate your brand with them to make sure that when you're doing that outreach, they feel like they know you, they feel like they know you as a company.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? Go ahead and type them in. Just a reminder, while we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, just want to let everybody know that our next Lunch and Learn will be on March 30th at noon, and it's a federal legal update presented by Michelle Gomez from Littler Medicine. Let me take a peek over here and see if we've got any questions. Nope, looks pretty quiet. Thank you so much, Mark. It was very informative, and our members, I'm sure, will, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and send me an email, cboyer@naps360.org, and I'll go ahead and forward it to Mark. I also want to remind everybody that this year, 2021, we are having our conference in Las Vegas, September 26th through the 28th in the Green Valley Resort. So let me look one more time. No more questions. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me, Carolyn. Appreciate it.
All right. You have a great day, and everybody else have a great day. And thank you on the behalf of the entire NAPS organization.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.